Last week, we got to the point where we were looking at the future of work from various different perspectives. And I suppose this week, it'd be quite nice to talk about what does it potentially mean from a prioritization perspective. If it all goes to plan, let's say, and things do change for the better, and we do learn from this period and apply some of those learnings to the way that we work in the future, and hopefully have got into some decent well-being / kind of mindfulness habits that will mean that we won't want to return to how we used to work, whatever that looked like, then what are the things that we've learned from that? And what are the things we would want to push forward? A good starting point. Has anyone seen anything really interesting that has got them thinking about how we might start to move out of this, but learn from the mistakes of the past and apply some new ways of working?
I can't remember who said it, but somebody said that change goes very slowly and then all at once. Is it, the zeitgeist before all this happened was moving towards environmental sustainability, thinking about how we work better, innovation, all of that. If this doesn't give it a massive great shove, then I'll be really disappointed.
I totally agree.
I just find that what's interesting is maybe it's the people on the ground who are going to start to change things properly, because I've spoken to so many people who, despite the trauma that we've all experienced in various ways, there aren't many people who want to get back to normal or who want to go back to the office. For example, I was talking to a client who has a networking business, and there's no way I'm going to be going to Ashton Gate at 7 a.m. Bi-weekly. I can't see the point in it. So, and he agrees, so it's almost like who's going to dictate how the changes occur? I mean, Cecilia was talking about, Lawson and he's very traditional and let's go back to where we came from. But then there are people who are actually experiencing new ways that I think are going to be less able to change back.
I think it's often the case, isn't it, that politicians lag behind the population. So when change is required, a population or the kind of normal thinking kind of gradually evolves until it reaches the point where it becomes impossible for politicians to ignore it anymore, and then they have to change as well. And I wonder if there's some sort of you could see the situation as a sort of catalyst in that sense, because it has sort of moved everyone's thinking around a bit. Not quite sure where we're going to land, but it could be that is going to create a sort of critical mass to think in different ways, in sort of, especially in our sort of top of our political system.
Well, certainly, what I've taken on board is that this is a chance for us to become more human-centered in how we live our lives. So we can take control of our own health. We can take back control of our finances. We can take back control of how we want to live. But it does seem to be a moment where lots of people are questioning stuff that they kind of just did before, or it just happened. Like you went to the surgery if you went very well, or you went to university after school, or whatever. And I wonder whether that's actually a good thing, and we need to keep hold of it. It needs to be become habit that we say, well, actually, do you know what? I don't want to go back to everything that we went to before.
I think I've read quite a few books over the last 12 months, I guess, which talk about leadership and management, and also, brands and how to develop a productive, inspiring culture. And most of what comes out of that is talking about, not having those set guidelines of when you work, when you don't work, kind of policing everybody, but more about individual kind of needs, working and being trusted to work when you can, and actually getting so much more out of people in terms of a sense of loyalty, a sense of love for the brand or the organisation, just generally all round a better, more positive environment. And I think we're now in a situation where I'm sure a lot of businesses will have seen how some of their employees have actually stepped up. And hopefully it will be a case of thinking about where we're going to take this now. How are we going to add in a little bit more ownership and trust so that we can get as much as we can from the people, and they can get as much as they can from us.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think, I'm an optimist, but my view, unlike the view that was presented right at the beginning, is that actually it's a massive opportunity, and so many things have just been thrown out of the window, and all of these things we thought that were unimaginable are now imaginable. And I think that means that we unquestionably will look at things in a different way in the future. We've opened our minds in new ways, and for me, it's about this sort of diversity of perspective, and I think we've all gained that, and it's a massive opportunity to leverage that moving forwards. I think in terms of the leadership piece, I see it being totally connected. You mentioned the piece around inclusion, and I think that people working remotely has given, I guess people are exposing a little bit more of themselves. Their kids are walking past in the background, and you've kind of got these, very real images of who people really are. And that forces a certain amount of authenticity, and people are starting to feel a bit more comfortable with being themselves. And organizations are starting to realize that actually, it doesn't matter what they're wearing, or some of these kind of details that don't matter. And then you start to create an environment of inclusion, and you start to think about, well, actually, if we've got people at home, we need to think about their specific situations. We need to think about how we can make best use of their time, how we can work for them. So I think it shifts everything. And I think this piece around authenticity is really important, and also around encouraging diverse perspectives to come together to ultimately have a better view of how something could work.
Yeah, I think you mentioned it there as well. It's interesting how we're going to prioritise time after this, because a lot of us have found, most of us have found that we've got more time in our hands, and whether that's just because we don't have weekend obligations that we have to go to, or usual routines that we think we have to stick with. And you mentioned it earlier, Philippa, in terms of like travelling to a networking event. 1 or 2 days a week, I'll be on the motorway for about 8 hours in that day to go and see a client face to face. And although I still think that's going to be really important for some meetings, or for when you're getting to know people in the first instance, most of the time, if you think I'm not traveling at all now, and I'm seeing the benefits of how much more I can get done in a week, and you can focus on work a lot more deeply because I'm not in the office or I'm not traveling around. So I'm focusing kind of 2 hours at a time, say, with all of the notifications off, and you're just getting a perspective on how much you can do. Yeah. So I think it is going to be interesting to see how people, whether they go back into old habits, or whether they say, actually, I've got a choice around how I use my time. There's other ways to do things. So how am I going to choose to spend it, whether that's personally or at work?
Yeah. The bit that I find really interesting connected to that is this idea that you can start to become much more focused as an organization in terms of measuring productivity and performance rather than presenteeism. And as an organization, you need to get, and a lot of the work that I've been doing is around sort of implementing some tools that I've developed, but it's around being really focused on what your goals are, what you're trying to achieve, breaking that down into specific tasks that people will complete, and being driven in terms of the results that you're going to create. And I think if you can get that working well, it doesn't matter what time people log on to do what they're doing. And it's about building that culture. So a lot of the work that I've been doing is around having the process, but also building the culture and the trust and the working practices and the relationships to be able to make that work. In terms of COVID, I saw this amazing interview with a guy who he worked at a factory. He was a sort of team leader at a factory in Bristol. I think it was in Bristol actually. And he was saying that his team, the factory no longer make parts for aeroplanes, I think it was. They now make ventilator parts. And he was saying his team has never worked so hard. They're in the factory day and night. But they're so motivated. They're so happy to be doing it because they know that they're making a difference. And I think
that was Renishaw. I think that was the Renishaw guy.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I just thought, what I've been doing is looking at this, kind of helping organizations think about purpose and then connect it to impact. And you kind of go through your strategic planning to get from one to the other. But I think a lot of organizations, they don't start with the purpose. They just start with their kind of goals, and then they just think about results, but not taking it through to impact. And I think that's the bit that really connects you to the people and the individuals, and the stuff that really drives and motivates people. So it was amazing to listen to him, actually.
Where at the intersection between digital transformation desire to work in different ways and something coming along to make you have to work in different ways has been this perfect storm of opportunity to make that change. So practically, we know we can work from home, or we know we can work in different ways if we need to. Digitally, we have been enabled to do so by the way digital has met the need. And thirdly is the movement, the pre-coronavirus sort of movement towards a review of health, well-being, wellness, inclusion, diversity, respect for your fellow people in the work environment, respect for other people's opinions, and space to listen to what other people have to say, and also the fact that we have never before have we been able to review, look at bias in the media, look at bias in the way that we're being told we have to work, and review that from an authenticity perspective. Do I believe in that? Do I agree with that? Do I think that that's the right purpose? Are you as a business on the same journey that I'm on personally? And all of that can come together and go, right, okay, let's button all that up and take that into the future with us, because we're enabled to now. Technology has enabled us to be able to do that.
Somebody mentioned about having the whole concept of having more time and feeling better about that. I think naturally being in an office, you are able much more freely to lean into free time, because you can go to the kitchen and have a coffee, or you can nip to have a friendly chat with somebody over here, or you're in a meeting when half the time you're not really in the meeting, you're out the meeting. I think with these calls particularly, you can't afford to not pay attention, because everybody is literally in the room concentrating and getting things done. And consequently, it keeps things moving, momentum's happening, you've got a fixed end time, and you're all going to go off to do something else. And I think you're feeling that, everyone I speak to is saying that their days are rushing past because they're so busy. And I think it's because people feel that sort of buoyant energy and forward motion. And the other thing was motivation. We were talking, Marissa was saying as well about motivation. And I think what's happening with this lockdown is the impetus is you've been forced to be doing things a certain way, and people are either pushing towards old normal, or they've been forced into lockdown. I think what would be really interesting is how people operate in this unknown space, because most people are highly motivated in peaks. So we're all highly motivated for a number of reasons. Some people might be because they're worried that they haven't got a job and they're highly motivated to get a new job. It might be because they're the few people that have kept their job and they're highly motivated to prove that they should still be there. And that will still be at play even for people who have got a purpose role. So we're talking about the fact that some people have shifted that role into something that's got a lot more purpose. But eventually, we've all gone through lockdown and we've all become a little bit bored now. We all want something else to change. And I'll be really interested to see how that affects people's motivation in the next set of, 6 to 10 weeks, because we were all really into, even you'll see the clapping outside your house. It was really great at the beginning, then it's really great, then it was really great, then it went down, then it went down, went down. And it's not because people don't care, but people were watching the news at the beginning and then it went down, then it went down. People are very peak orientated and hugely, I said this before, like we're a nation of novelty. And I think we care very much about something, but we've only got the physical energy to do that for a certain amount of time. And so it will be what creates that next spike of energy to help us get through the old normal, new normal.
This new way of working kind of works fine, but we just didn't want to take the leap before because there was no real reason to. So necessity is the mother of invention, as we all know. And the necessity is you've got to work in a different way. Go and figure it out. And actually, this is all right. I quite like this. Actually, yeah, I get the same vibe from people when I'm sat like this with them that I would if we were next to each other. I haven't had to spend 3 hours getting to you or an hour and a half getting to you. I'm tired. And I just want to get through it. And then I've got a 2-hour journey back, probably 3-hour journey back because it'll be rush hour and then I'm going to hit all the traffic. So you feel a lot more refreshed and you feel a lot more willing to share stuff because it's not, no one's made a big effort to get there. So you can be a little bit looser with what you talk about and it doesn't matter so much. And it just, this feels, I mean, we keep hearing, oh, everyone's different, everybody's different, organizations are different, people are different, everyone does things differently. Why on earth are we forcing everybody into the same model of learning and working? And if we're all different, let's work that's best for us, and then what's best for us will fit into the way of working for other people. This new normal should be, we put the person in the middle, and the person works how they best work. We've got the tools and the technologies to and there's sprints and things like that, where we have set amount of work to do in a set amount of time. It doesn't matter when we do it. As long as the work gets done, as long as what we need to do gets done, and actually we're going to be far more engaged with it because we're not forced down a particular route to be able to do it. Like you start at 9 and you finish at 6, or whatever it is.
I think the link comes back to inclusion, which is a massive sort of passion of mine. But I think that suddenly opens doors for people who maybe don't live in London, who couldn't make that networking event, or have got children and have got commitments around the certain times, or have caring responsibilities, or are have health issues themselves, which limits what they can and can't do. And there's just so many people out there who actually there are reasons why they can't conform with the current expectations around work. And suddenly when you break that all apart, you open the doors to so much more potential and so much more opportunity. And that's really exciting, and it gives us all a massive opportunity.
Just going back to the kind of doing everything remotely and digitally and not having that face-to-face meeting, I'll be honest, I still can't shift that how important a face-to-face interaction is to actually getting to know someone and forming a bond and a human connection. I think that definitely, I mean, this is great. I've liked these video calls, and being able to see people really helps. But there's got to be something, and I'm not too up on the psychology. Maybe, Catherine, you've got a better view on it. But there's something with the human connection of actually seeing someone, because they say that actually if you share food with someone, so if you have lunch with someone, then that helps with your bond. And I mean, I'll give an example. I worked with a client in Athens for about a year before I went to see them. And it was only when I went to see them and had a couple of beers with them in the evening and dinner that the relationship got a lot more friendly afterwards and a lot more of a personal connection. And that's just one experience, but it's still, it doesn't have to happen all the time, I think. But it's still, there's something there.
Having not had to meet face to face, and that whole idea of a chemistry meeting, where you kind of have to meet and you have to shake hands and you have to see how firm your grip is, and all that nonsense that you get, and you have to reflect the same as what if they're wearing suits, you've got to turn up in a suit as well, and hopefully that's the death of all of that.
People saying about the fact they haven't got any money to invest in things. I think, as you said, Charlie, people's mindset is just starting to shift on that, because there's that concept that anything new is a cost, but anything old is more reliable, as if we don't have to question what we did before. And I know when we were talking about recruitment, about the fact that, the last project manager's left, so we just need another project manager. And really on that concept, and probably Marissa's seen this as well, is that, do you need that, or do you need something fulfilled as a project, as an initiative, or is it just that you felt that you need to put someone in there and see how long they stick with that company? The other thing I thought was quite interesting is that the whole payment of people is done on hours per week for the majority of the population, who are sort of in, they're paid on 37.5 hours a week. And I wonder what that, if that will change, because, when we try and sell, particularly as consultants or as business owners, we're trying to sell on value. And then obviously the price comes in at the end. But we're selling not on, by the way, as a consultant, I'll work for you for 40 hours a week. I'm selling on an end result and an outcome. But actually, as people in full-time roles, I'm quite interested in, this 37 hours a week. Well, I bet you that they've been working 20 hours a week so much more efficiently, and forget the other 17 and a half, because they're doing what you need them to do, and how people are paid and how they're seen as value, and perhaps there'll be a sort of an analysis on how people are seen in that kind of context.
Yeah, I feel like I'm probably twice as productive, but half as tired, roughly, because I'm doing stuff that I want to do. Not stuff that I'm getting pulled into this meeting, so I've got to do that. Yeah, kind of some of the stuff's just mind-numbingly draining, but some of it is, everything is done on the basis that I want to be doing this right now. And do you know what? I'm going to go and mow the lawn after lunch, but then I'm going to jump on this evening and I'm going to finish it. And you have that choice. And I suppose it comes down to choice. What this has given us, this space, is choice to use the time how we want within the confines of knowing we've got a job to do.
Yeah, there was a term I think you used weeks ago, but I don't think it was on this call. It was before it all kicked off, I think, Charlie, where you said it's almost like life-work balance now, where work has to work around life because the kids are at home and everything's a bit different and you're at home. And that stuck with me, actually. I really liked that concept of why is it work-life balance, kind of work comes first in that saying, but life-work balance, switching that around. And it's all right for the kids to be in the back of the Zoom call. And because that's life, that's how it all works for all of us.
But that's what I was thinking when you were talking about your kind of vision for reimagining the education system, is I think that without, that was enough of something to take on, but I think extending it to reimagine how that fits with parenting and the working world of parenting is really important, because the education system is this kind of crazy setup where between 9 o'clock and 3:15 children go to school. Like, how does that work for working parents? Like, what's that all about? It just doesn't compute, and that then places enormous constraints on parents in terms of how they balance all of that. And I just think that whole piece can be reimagined, and that will change all sorts of things in terms of the gender pay gap, for example.
Yeah, the higher education sector is going to be a really interesting one to watch there, because there are so many interdependencies between people's jobs and school, because our jobs are structured in a way, or rather school is structured in a way that at least makes it partly possible to work, and it's going to be very hard to ask parents who have been asked to go back into the workplace to change, to move to an education model where the kids are at home more, unless the workplace has also changed. So there's all these interdependencies there. But I think higher education is really interesting because there's a lot more freedom there. The students are paying for their education and they are free to vote with their feet and say, no, I'm not, I don't want to go to university in this way anymore. And I think there's going to be quite a lot of change on that front. The way our whole education model, our higher education model is funded as well, with huge amounts of international students, that's going to change as well.
And it's worth probably remembering that for a lot of people, school is actually a safe place, and home is not a safe place or a structured place or an ordered place. So, we can't design a system that only works for people who, have comfortable lives.
Well, absolutely.
Yeah. A lot of it is choice, isn't it? I think you've talked a few times that you've mentioned sort of the fact that it's more me-centered in the sense that you can choose what you want to do, and that's beneficial. And that's probably just as true for children, to have more choice about when and how they access learning. And maybe that's more motivating as well. For some people, the choice is actually they want to be in a classroom because that's where they feel safe or comfortable or whatever.
Yeah, look forward to the next one. And please, anything interesting you see, anything you want to share, whack it in the LinkedIn group, and I'll see you all on the other side.